Hello and welcome to the demo for Stars Align. I was suggested this game by someone in my Discord DMs. They basically told me, hey, there's this platformer. After you played games like Roblox 64, I think you'll like it. It's a demo for the game that's going to full release at some point, and apparently it's been in development for a very, very long time. Now, unfortunately, unlike pretty much every single other Roblox platformer that I've covered on this channel, this one, well, yeah, this ain't it. I feel kind of bad saying it because it's completely unfair. This game is going to get judged against Roblox 64, which in my opinion is the best Roblox platformer I've played by a pretty significant margin. And so when you're getting measured up against the best things of your class, well, that's gonna be rough. It's double not fair considering that this is the demo for the game and the full game isn't out yet. But that being said, the problems that I had with the game pretty much all stemmed from the gameplay and the control of the game and not of the actual levels themselves. Although the levels themselves, well, I did have plenty of issues with those as well. I don't like to be all negative though, you guys know that, so we're gonna start off by talking about the positive things that I have to say about the game before we get into the, well, less flattering stuff. I think the number one interesting thing that Stars Align had going for it was the power-ups and the way that they function in levels. I believe there were 3 power-ups in the demo, a power-up that boosted your speed, a power-up that boosted your jump height, and the bomb power-up, which is sort of like boosting your jump height, but you only get one of them. Now obviously these have a myriad of applications. The speed boost power-up was usually placed in an area where you needed to clear large gaps, the jump boost power-up likewise in areas that you needed to jump really high, and then the bomb power-up was probably the most interesting of all, because in order to activate getting access to the bomb power-up on a level itself, you would have to collect several little bomb tokens, which would make it able to spawn. This can also happen with the other power-ups, but it was mostly present with the bomb power-up. Another thing that was really nice about Stars Align was the direction and how clear it was always where they wanted you to go. Well, other than probably the last level, but going up to the last level, everything was very clear on where the game needed you to go. There was never a point where I got somewhere and I was like, oh man, I'm lost. And I think pretty much all of that stems from a very solid usage of the little stars in the game that you can collect like you would collect coins in Mario. Something that goes underappreciated in Mario games is the way that the game uses coins to generally show you safe paths or guide you with direction on where you need to go. It's why games that lack some of these small, mostly insignificant collectibles can sometimes have problems with you trying to figure out, well, what's the right direction. It also helps because if you've already collected something in an area, you can immediately tell from first glance that it's somewhere you've already been. Unfortunately though, because of how pretty simplistic the game is, those are the only good things that I can talk about for today. Now we have to start talking about the negatives, and really there's just 2 main ones that overshadow the entire rest of the game. And the most important one, and the first one we're going to talk about, is the controls. The controls and feeling of control in this game just isn't quite there. It's not bad, it's not like I feel completely out of control of my character, but it just doesn't feel on the same level as games like Roblox 64. I think it also ends up suffering heavily from the fact that, well, the controls are extremely simple, so there's not much room for interpretation when you get to areas of the game. It's extremely linear, and if you're not doing directly what the game wants you to do, you can't clear an area. That's just the way it's gonna be. When it comes to the control scheme, there are not very many buttons that you can push. You can jump, pretty much goes without saying. You can dive with shift. You can long jump with shift on the ground and jump. And finally, you can cancel a dive by pressing spacebar if you've already done one and you're airborne. Now this in of itself isn't a bad thing. It doesn't leave a lot of opportunity for expression, but generally that would be fine. I say it would be fine if for whatever reason they hadn't made it so that way when you do the grounded long jump, which looks and performs basically identical to the airborne dive, you're unable to cancel it mid-air. So if you do the long jump, you are committed. You have to do the long jump. This just starts making me shake my head and be confused because, well, I have to wonder, why can't you cancel this jump if it performs almost identically to the dive? Like, it covers basically the exact same range. It's slightly longer, but it's significantly worse because you can't cancel it. This sort of 2-button system of having only access to shift and spacebar gets out of hand very quickly. The sheer amount of times that I went to go jump for a platform and then I did an extra jump and jumped off, or I decided that I wanted to try to do a dash, but I couldn't do a dash and it dove me off a cliff, or I wanted to do a dive and instead I rolled off a cliff. Just so many misinputs. It is unbelievable. And that's what happens when you have an extremely simplistic control scheme. If pressing one button has the potential of doing different things that all have the potential of having different outcomes, well, you're gonna run into problems. It's inevitable. And really, when we just go from looking at a game like Stars Align, where you have such little freedom in what you want to do, and then we look at Superblock 64, well, it's almost depressing. Superblock 64 gives you access to a mid-air dive that you can use in the air by pressing E. If you're on the ground, you can hit shift to crouch. If you jump while crouched, you'll do a backflip, which gives you more height. If you hit shift mid-air, you'll do a ground pound. If you click mid-air, you'll do a little air kick that can give you a little extra distance. If you jump mid-air, you can either do a double jump or a little flutter move, depending on your character. And finally, if you're running, crouch and then jump, you'll do a long jump. Now, the thing about all these different controls is that other than shift sometimes ending up giving you a ground pound when you're airborne and screwing you over, they're almost all dedicated to different keys, which means that if I'm pressing a key, I know what's going to happen. Stars Align, well, not so much. If I'm really close to the ground and I want to do a dive and I press shift, I might hit the ground before my input comes out and roll off the cliff. I can't stop myself from rolling off the cliff because if I jump during a roll on the ground, I'll do a long jump and further send myself off the cliff, which I can't cancel with spacebar. So if that roll starts, I'm just dead. Now, I've spent a long time talking about controls, but the other thing that I want to talk about is the level design and the obsession with one-hit kills. So earlier on in the game doesn't really struggle with this, but it became very clear on the later levels of the demo that they were just struggling for what would be fun difficulty, and what their conclusion that they came to is to make it so that every 6 steps something instantly kills you. It was starting to feel like I was playing one of those Kaizo Mario games rather than playing a platformer that was made, well, for fun. And I get that these levels are supposed to be at the end of the demo, so they're supposed to be hard, but the biggest tell that your difficulty isn't being fair is if you have to put checkpoints every 15 steps. And that's what this game does. The checkpoints are unbelievably forgiving, and they have to be because the game is unbelievably clunky and unfair at these later stages. I mean, just look at these platforms and let me walk you through why this is a problem. So you're not able to normally jump up onto these platforms. You just can't do it. That means that in order to get up here, you need to jump, air dash, and then cancel the air dash. So that means hitting jump, shift, and then spacebar. But the thing is that these platforms are also just big enough that sometimes your air dash is just enough to get you on top of the platform. What that means is that if you jump, hit shift to air dash, and then jump again, well, what's gonna happen here? I can tell you what's gonna happen. The platform's gonna disappear because it's a breakable platform. You're not gonna have the time to react because you expected to cancel and then hit spacebar again. You're not gonna make the next platform and you're gonna die. This is one of those things where it's just like mountains of problems all on top of each other. And it's also one of those things where if this had been in Superblock 64, because canceling the jump isn't also tied to spacebar, if this had happened there, I would have jumped, done an air dash, then left clicked in order to cancel my momentum and cancel the jump, and if I'd landed on the ground, left click wouldn't jump again, and it also wouldn't fly me off the platform. There are myriads upon myriads upon myriads of examples of stuff exactly like this. So when you take into consideration and combine all of the frustrating controls with the unbelievably unforgiving insta-kill hazards, and the fact that they had to put checkpoints every 6 steps because they knew people were just going to get one-shot killed by everything in sight, well, it makes me very, very skeptical about the full release of this game. Can it be fun? Maybe, but they're gonna have a lot of work to do when it comes to the controls department, in my opinion. I think the end-all be-all is that they absolutely need to rebind some of these controls to different keys. First of all, jumping and canceling a dive, both being on spacebar, is a real problem. That's gotta go. Whether it be left click, alt, left control, who knows? Pick something, but it can't be what it is right now. I also think there needs to be a better differentiation between the long jump and the aerial dive. Right now, they're basically exact clones of each other, with the grounded long jump being slightly longer, but overall it just doesn't matter at the end of the day. They're so similar that I didn't run into a single scenario where they weren't interchangeable, and because of that, I didn't run into a single scenario where it wouldn't just be better to use the aerial one because you can cancel it. Speaking of, good lord, you should be able to cancel the grounded dive, considering it's basically exactly the same. Overall, I don't think that this game is completely a lost cause, but I also think that when it comes to the other heavy hitters in the genre like Super Block 64, the developers have a lot of work ahead of them. Speaking of Super Block 64, there were some new levels added to that game when I went back to revisit it to make sure I wasn't going crazy, and if you either haven't played those new levels or you've never played the game itself, I could not recommend it enough. That game is fantastic, probably the best platformer on the entirety of the Roblox platform. Please go play it. With that though, I am wrapping up here. So if you enjoyed the video, you can of course leave a like and subscribe. If you didn't, don't. And with all that being said, have a wonderful day and night wherever you are, and I'll see you guys next time.